What's up guys, Kevin or the Sports Geek here, and in this video I'm going to try to break down how I won $40,000 on DraftKings PGA Contests this past weekend. So it was the Puerto Rico Open this past weekend, and I entered two different contests at DraftKings, ended up taking first in the Club Pro and third in the dogleg. So I won $40,000 in total, but I had quite a bit of money invested. So I want to first let you guys know that although I did win $40,000, I do play quite a bit of lineups and quite a bit of money. So this Club Pro is a $333 contest. So very big contest for big guys with bigger bankrolls basically. But I did win it for $25,000, finished sixth for $4,000. So that was awesome. And then in the dogleg, which is a $33 contest, I finished third for $10,000. So I did have a number of lineups in each of these contests. In the $33 contest, I believe I had 29 lineups, I think it was. And in the Club Pro, I had 10 lineups. So I did invest quite a bit of money on DraftKings. If you're playing in the smaller contest, obviously you'd be happy with the $1,000, $2,000, whatever it is. But I just want to break down how I came first in this contest, how I built this lineup, and kind of how I build my lineups each week. Obviously, you're not going to come first. You're not going to cash huge each week. But if you have a good process, then soon enough, you probably will win a big GPP or at least finish near the top of a big GPP. So my process is usually the same each week. I kind of try different things here and there, but my process is very similar. The first thing I'm going to do each week is I'm going to do some research on a variety of number sites, Fantasy Labs being my favorite site. We'll talk about them on how I build lineups with Fantasy Labs in a second, but I do research on Fantasy Labs, PGA Tour, Fantasy Fanatics, Fanshare, and then I look at a bunch of different articles, including the guys that write for the Sports Geek, my site, and a number of other sites as well. So I do a ton of research. I try to soak in as much information as I can about the course and about the players and about the new players playing, maybe from the web.com tour, from just guys that I haven't really heard about or heard of. And all the top players, look at their form, look at their course history, just kind of do as much research as I can. And then once that's complete, I usually get myself a player pool of about, depends. Sometimes I used to do smaller player pools, smaller golfer pools with about 15 golfers. And that was when I was building usually around maybe 10 lineups per contest. Now I've been bumping it up. I've been doing a lot more entries into the contest. So I bump it up to sometimes between usually about 20 to 30 golfers, sometimes a little more. And what I'll do is I'll come into Fantasy Labs. So this is my favorite tool to use for the research. The model, the Sports Geek model, is available to anyone who signs up for the Fantasy Labs. So if you don't have an account, I've got a link to Fantasy Labs in the link or in the description below this video. Make sure you click on that link. Make sure you sign up and you'll get access to the Sports Geek Pro model. Highly recommend Fantasy Labs. I'm always talking about them. I'm a promoter for them, and they've helped me win a lot of money. So I'm very glad to promote them. Great tools, and definitely can't thank them enough to help me win another big GPP with their lineup generator and their tools here. So I created the Sports Geek Pro model, and it's available to anyone who signs up for a Fantasy Labs account. Just go under golf and to models and click this button here, and you'll see the Pro model that you can copy over into your own models. So this past week, I did a video on Fantasy Labs that you can check out. But I did kind of tweak the model for the Puerto Rico Open. I changed the driving accuracy up a little bit and took down driving distance just a little bit. And I did that for recent and long-term form just because I felt that that course was a little more reliant on driving accuracy. Usually I have driving accuracy set to 0. 9 times out of 10, I'll just leave that at 0. But if the course maybe relies on driving accuracy, I'll bump down driving distance a little bit and driving accuracy up. So that's what I did for this past week. And then I had my player pool set of about somewhere around 30 golfers. I think this week it was a little higher because it was a weaker field event. There's a lot of kind of no-name guys some of them that I wanted to include. So I had a pretty big player pool. So what I'll do is I'll go to Fantasy Labs here and I'll go to, I'll click unlike all for everyone. And then the golfers that I want, I'll click like. And then once you have all the golfers that you want in your player pool, you're going to go over here and you'll see it in your pool. And these are the guys that you can generate lineups with. You can set min and max exposures. I won't really get too far into that. But then you can go over, so you have all your players listed here. You have your exposures, so the percentages that you want those guys in your lineup. And then you're going to use the lineup generator here to generate some lineups. So that's how I did it. That's how I won the $40,000. But a lot of it that I don't really talk about is kind of the research that goes into it and kind of the strategy. So a lot of it is just looking at how the course plays, which golfers will fit that course, which golfers come into the tournament in great form. So a lot of times with golf, you'll have guys maybe they have some bad swing thoughts, or I don't know what it is, but sometimes really good golfers can be struggling for maybe it's only 2 or 3 weeks, and then they get it figured out. But during that time might be a good time to fade them. Maybe some guys just really are feeling it right now and they're doing really well lately. Maybe they're not great golfers overall, but for the last couple of weeks, they've been playing well. So I look at recent form quite a bit, and I look at course history. If you know the places that you want to miss, or if you know how the greens are like, how to read the greens, if you've played the course a lot, that usually plays a big factor as well. So that's another thing that I really look at. And then I just look at PGA stats as well, stuff like strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained putting, birdie or better percentage, driving distance. I look at all that stuff and see who are the leaders in those categories as well. And a lot of that's baked into the models as well, but I still look on PGA Tour. I just kind of like looking at the leaderboard there, looking at the top maybe 20, 30 golfers. So do as much research as I can. And then I think one of the key things to my lineup building that I do is I choose a couple golfers to fade. So they might be golfers that I think could play well, but I think that they possibly could have a bad week and miss the cut. And I think that maybe they're going to be 10, 15, 20, 25% owned. So a lot of people in the contest might have this golfer. And I just have a feeling that maybe he will do well, but there's a way he could possibly miss the cut. Or maybe I think it's a better chance that he misses the cut, something like that. For whatever reason, I find a couple guys that I want to fade. Maybe it's just they're coming off one bad tournament. Maybe they'd been doing really well. They had one missed cut and people will still be on him, but I think that he might have lost his form. I might fade him for that reason. Maybe he's playing really well and he's never played that course before, but a lot of people are going to be on him because he's been playing really well lately. That might be a good time to hop off that golfer. So that's one key thing I do. I do fade some golfers that it's tough to do. They are either in good form or they have good course history. They look like a good play, but I'll just decide to fade them. This past week, I did that with Graham McDowell a little bit for my Club Pro lineups. I didn't have him in any of my Club Pro lineups. I did kind of like him. The research kind of led me to him, but I decided to fade him. That worked out for me. But on the other hand, I had played a lot of Graham Dillette, who I really liked, and he missed the cut. But that's just something I do. I'll pick a couple golfers that I'll have basically 0% to. If I'm doing a ton of lineups, I might have them in maybe 1 or 2 lineups, but I'll pick some golfers that I'll just completely fade. Sometimes it doesn't work out at all. It didn't work out great a couple weeks ago. This week it worked out pretty well. And then sometimes I'll just try to go low exposure to guys that I think will be high owned. So if there's a guy that's going to be, let's say, in 30% of lineups, let's say, for example, Seamus Power. So I liked him this week. I did play him. But if he was a guy that I thought was going to be about 32% owned like he was, maybe I would just do 10% Seamus Power in my lineup. So maybe I'd have him in 1 of 10 lineups. But if I really liked him, I wouldn't care about the ownership. But if it's a guy that you're kind of up in the air about, then maybe you'll kind of reduce your exposure compared to the field. So those are things I think of when I'm building my lineups. And then, that kind of goes into my player pool and my exposures that I set in Fantasy Labs. All these thoughts are going through my head when I'm making my exposures, and then I'll set my exposure. So an example would be Luke List this past week. He was a guy that I really liked, but I knew would be popular. I thought maybe he could finish maybe outside the top 10, top 15, and then I could kind of get an edge that way if he did, which he ended up doing. I thought it was very risky. I thought he was maybe the best play in the field, but I thought there was a way that he could, and it ended up coming through. So I had him, and I think I had him set 10 to 20%. I wanted him originally. I was thinking I would have him in about 30% of my lineups, but after looking at it and thinking that everyone would be on him, I felt like he was a guy that I could maybe reduce my exposure to. So I set him, I think it was 10 to 20%. I think I ended up having him in 1 lineup, so 1 out of 10 lineups, possibly 2 out of 10 lineups. But that's what I did for him. That ended up working out well because he didn't score too well on DraftKings this past week. And then for guys that you really like, so for example, Peter Uihlein, I thought he'd be somewhat popular, but I wanted to make sure I had more than the field. So I think I did like 30 to 50% of him. So when you're generating your lineups, Fantasy Labs is going to try to get this guy in between 30 to 50% of your lineups if you set the exposures to that. Sometimes it's not exact, but you can do some tweaking afterwards. So those are basically the thoughts that go through my head when I'm creating my lineups. I tried to give out as much information as I can. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully my picks this week, which will be coming up in a video, hopefully tonight or early tomorrow morning, hopefully those will help you win some money as well. If you guys enjoyed these videos, make sure you click that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and good luck this week. Cheers, guys.